welcome back to my channel. Over the next few weeks I'm going to be discussing everything to do with property and sources, what they are, what they are used for, why people use property sources, benefits of that, what red flags to look out for, and anything to do with property sources. So I'm super excited. In addition, I am doing a series of interviews with active property sources, which I'm super excited about. So hopefully I can deliver tons of value to you guys and making sure that you are investing your time in working with the right property sources if that is something for you. So firstly, what is a property sourcer? So a property sourcer is someone who essentially finds the deal, negotiates the value of the deal, finds out what the refurb cost is, if there is a refurb cost, essentially finds out what the GDV is and what the rental is likely to be. They will package that up and essentially sell it on to a property investor for a fee. Now, usually they are below market value or there is some sort of meaty deal depending on what the investor is looking for. So ideally property sources will vet the investor and find out exactly what they're looking for, if it's a buy-to-let, a HMO, what their specific criteria is, and base their deals off of that. If you have been following my journey on Facebook or Instagram, which is where I normally post, you know that I work with property sources and they have really helped me grow my portfolio and become a more hands-off investor. And what I mean by hands-off is I'm still actively involved, but I'm not physically there going looking at properties and pricing them up and negotiating. That I leave to the experts because I'm definitely not an expert in that area. One of the reasons I started off using property sources is because I am very time poor and the yields in London where I live aren't that great, and I was finding it very difficult, and the fact that I needed to put in maybe 200 grand deposit for my first deal was very scary. And I don't know, for me it was a lot of money to invest and the yields weren't that great, and something that I was definitely looking for was cash flow. And I know everyone says invest locally, but I decided to do the opposite and look for cheaper areas, which is not right or wrong. There's no right or wrong within property investing. It literally depends on you. But I know there are people that say invest closer to you, which does really make sense. But for me, my choice was to invest further away just because it was a lower entry point and the cash flow was a lot higher. So when you're investing outside of your area, you don't know the areas. And where I was specifically focusing on HMOs, I didn't know the area. I didn't know if there was demand. I didn't know what the property prices were. If it was listed at £50,000, is it actually worth £50,000? Is it actually worth £70,000? I didn't know. And I didn't know if it was a dodgy street or not. And the first time I went to Burnley, which is where my first property is some of the houses were boarded up, and I'm so grateful that I didn't just kind of go there, going on a few viewings and then just getting any random property. I'm so glad I work with someone who knew and lives in that area and knows that area like the back of her hand. And the thing is, this particular sourcer also had HMOs in the area and knew other investors that had HMOs in that area, so it made it so much easier to say, okay, this is what this price was, this is what the refurb was, and this is what the end value is. And they can show you the product, which I really liked because I knew they were active, I knew what the end product was going to be, and I knew what the financials were going to be. I have an interview lined up with this property sourcer, which I'm super excited about because she held my hand during the first instance of me buying a property. She helped me so much, so I'm super excited to be having her as my first guest. So tune in next week for this interview. Another reason is I wanted to be a little bit hands-off in my approach to investing in property. There are so many moving parts to property. Finding the deals is one part. Going through the process of buying the deal is another part. Renting the property out is another part. And then sitting back and relaxing and enjoying the cash flow is another. So while I'm busy doing all of the other parts, and the other part I forgot to mention is raising money. I don't have money to invest. I had a little bit, but I don't have a lot. And eventually you are going to run out of some money, and that in itself is another job. So trying to manage all of those different things was really difficult for me, especially that I'm working full-time in the city. It took me an hour and a half to commute one way when I was at my first job when I first started, and now it's an hour, and there's not much that I can do in that time. So it's really difficult to focus on all of the different moving parts, whereas if I can outsource a lot of that stuff, even if I have to pay for it, it helps me with my time, my work life, social life balance. And the fact that I can rely on a good team, and I know they're going to be in the area, I know they can negotiate well, and I know what the finished product is. So I'm really happy that I can essentially offload the biggest part of my property journey, which was stopping me. And not being in the area really does affect me, because I can't just go to a viewing. I can't say, hey, I want to go look at this property, or this property's come out on the market on Monday, can I go and view it? If I did, I would have to go on Saturday. And then the fact that is, it's a whole day for me to go up to all of these places. It's a whole day. And if I already have plans with family or anything like that, then essentially I would be a ghost to everyone. And something that I definitely wanted to maintain was my work-life balance, and the fact that I work full-time, invest in property, do everything else in property, and then have a social life at the age of 23 was just seemingly impossible. And it's something that I wasn't prepared to sacrifice every single week. And I know a lot of people say you need to make sacrifices, and I did make a lot of sacrifices, but not to the point where I don't see my family, I don't see my friends, I don't like go on dates with my boyfriend and things like that. This was just my take on it. Everyone is different, and I know people say you need to go and do everything in property, but this is just what works for me. And I'm not saying that you have to do the same thing, but this is just what works for me. So after I formed alliances with two of my business partners, both my aunties, we decided, and I made the call saying, look, there's three of us in the business, we can go out and go view our own properties and everything to do with that, because we can leverage each other. And the one thing that became really, really hard was to go and view properties on a Saturday, because that was the only time that we could go. And viewing properties on a Saturday, one, we didn't know the area that we were looking at. There's properties that we saw were more in a residential area rather than closer to the city. There wasn't really many bus links and things like that. And it's really easy to do your research online, but when you're actually there, and the distance and the not driving, etc., really does make a difference when you're there in person. The other thing is that if a property came up on Monday or Tuesday, we were ringing the agents to go and view that property for Saturday. 5 out of 6 properties we couldn't actually view on Saturday because they've gone off the market. Someone's already gone in, made an offer. So sometimes we would go to these places and only have one viewing booked, and it would be such a waste of our time. And it seemed like we were classed as like London investors, and it has this weird connotation to it to think that, one, you're rich and you have loads of money, you can buy any property, and two, you're not a real investor because you can't go out of your time or go out of your way to go and view the property straight away. It just became seemingly impossible, and then we made the call, let's go and use our time to go and build relationships with property sources who were in the area doing this full time as a job, and you know, getting deals and negotiating deals for us. The other thing that I wanted to mention is I have no clue about refurbs, especially a HMO refurb. I don't even know how much that costs. And that was one thing. So you would go and view a property, it would list as £180,000 in Peterborough or in Birmingham, wherever we were looking. And we just did not know the refurb cost. So it's all well and good going and offering all of these properties, but unless you have a builder or you know about buildings and like how much things would cost, it was impossible for us. I had no idea. So even if we did put an offer in for, let's say it was on the market for 180,000, we got it at 170,000 or 175,000 at this time and moment, I still don't know about refurbs. I couldn't even give you a clue. I didn't even know if it stacked up or not. So we were very conscious in finding someone who has essentially what we call a full package deal. So someone who can find the property, someone who has a build team that can go out and do the property renovations and give us an accurate quote on how much it would cost, and then what the end value would be based on the products that they've done or based on the market and comparables. So all in all, I genuinely believe that property sources have really helped accelerate our portfolio to the point that every single deal that we have done has come from a property source. And I'm really excited because I feel like if it wasn't making that decision, I would still probably be on my first property, and I would probably have bought a crappy property that, I don't know, would have just not been as good. And the thing is, all property sources do charge a fee, but you have to think about your time and your knowledge of the market, especially if you're a new investor. They can really help you get your first property because they already have the systems in place. They already have their marketing, they already have relationships with estate agents, etc. They already have things in place for you to essentially push yourself into that barrier, so you don't have to create everything. What is the point of starting from scratch, creating all of these new processes when someone already has it and you pay them a fee for it? So for me, my time is precious, so paying someone a reasonable fee for it really does help. When I was going through my first deal with a property sourcer, I went to a 3-day seminar, which essentially is more of a pitch than anything else. I'm not going to name any names or anything like that, but it was all to do with a basic 3-day intro into property investing to essentially be sold onto a 12-month course. However, when I presented that deal to them, I remember this specifically, and they said not to go for it, even though it was 42% return on investment. I had a £20,000 council loan to refurbish the property, and I had a hands-on team in this particular area of Burnley. And they just told me not to go for it because it was sourced. They didn't care about the numbers, the location, nothing. They said to me that you need to go to, on average, I don't even know where these law of averages came from, by the way, but 100 properties. Out of that, you'll probably get 5 offers accepted, and then you'll probably go for 1 or 2 properties. Now, in my head, if I think back to where I first started, if I could only go on Saturdays, and still to the point I can only go on Saturdays, is if I did 100 viewings and I only get 1 accepted, that would probably take me about 6 months if I was to do like 3 viewings every Saturday, bearing in mind that some of the viewings would have got cancelled. 6 months for my first property, and I still didn't even know what I was doing. Whereas I could have accelerated everything and bought a property and refurbed it potentially within 6 months. And it was just ridiculous to know that people still have this mentality to even tell people like you shouldn't work with property sources because you should spend that money on a course. And it was just ridiculous, and I'm so glad I didn't listen to his advice and I went ahead and bought the property, because that is a cash flowing asset and it's been doing well for me. So yeah, so for them to tell me that I need to do everything on my own, now we live in this work smart life. Okay, yes, I agree, working hard, but why would you work hard and not work smart? It makes 0 sense to me. So if there's something there that's already implemented to help you, if it's right for you, why would you not take that? For them to tell me that I need to do everything on my own was just ridiculous, and it's not what every property investor wants. And you need to know what people's objectives are, because without knowing what people's objectives are, you don't know what type of business that they want to run or how involved they want to be. And I appreciate that you do need to know basic stuff within property, and you do need to go and know certain things. But if you have the assistance of someone who's experienced, who has a couple more years experience than you do, it makes sense. I mean, it made sense to me, but it was just ridiculous to hear that advice that was given to you. I really hope you enjoyed that video about my kind of experience with property sources. Over the next few weeks, I am going to be doing more specific videos. If you have any topics that you want me to cover or share anything from my experience, please feel free to put them in the questions below or send me a message on Instagram. I'm super excited because the first lady that I ever worked with on my first project, I am interviewing next week. So please go and check that video out, and she is just